So welcome everybody. My name is Terry Peters. I'm a registered dietitian from the Patient Education Center, and I'm here today to talk to you about heart healthy eating and just healthy eating to support a variety of nutrition related concerns. Before we begin, a few things. Maybe first of all, go and grab a pen and a pad of paper if you don't already have that beside you. This is handy in case you have any questions that pop up as we go through the presentation. Also, there should be a package of handouts that were given to you either through email or maybe they were mailed to you or even given to you at a nurse appointment. And so there was just a collection of nutrition related handouts that will be referring to some of these during the presentation today. So it would be good if you had them handy. So if you want to just pause the video now, you can take a minute and grab what you need and then we'll get started. So. All right. So there may be many reasons why you're attending class today. We open this class up for a variety of nutrition concerns. So it could be that your doctor referred you for healthy eating advice to improve your cholesterol, or a part of your cholesterol called triglycerides. You could be here for some help with weight loss. Or diabetes. I know that this class is one of the classes offered to people with diabetes. We know definitely heart healthy eating is very important with diabetes. It's not just about blood sugar control. So this is an important class for those folks. High blood pressure, or maybe you've had a history of gestational diabetes and just looking for some lifestyle tips to decrease your risk of diabetes. Or maybe you're part of the cardiac program as well. And so this is the nutrition component of the cardiac rehab program. So regardless of why you're here today, I'm just hoping to give you some good strategies to make some healthy lifestyle changes to improve your overall health. So I welcome you today. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to do with you is you'll need that self-assessment checklist. So I've got an example of what mine looks like, and I'll try and hold it nice and close. You can see that. So it's called the self-assessment checklist, and it's got a variety of just kind of different tick boxes. And so if you want to just take a moment and go through the checklist, it asks some of the questions. Do I eat or drink these foods daily or every other day? So you would check the ones that apply. And then the bottom part says, do I regularly? And so the points are what are the things that you do on a regular basis? We're just trying to do a bit of a self-assessment here. So I'll just give you a moment to go through some of those questions and tick off the statements that apply to you. Okay, I hope I gave you enough time to quickly look through the list. If not, you can definitely pause the video. So that's the benefits of attending this way. But yeah, keep this list handy because we're going to maybe revisit this at the end of class. And this list might be maybe a good indicator of which lifestyle changes you want to focus on first. So it's good the more we know ourselves, the more we can be effective with our lifestyle changes. So when we're looking at some of the cornerstone lifestyle behaviors, there are some that are considered low risk. So studies show that low risk lifestyle behaviors are associated with a much lower risk, 60 to 80% lower risk of cardiovascular disease. So we want to try and implement as many of these as we can. So the first one is healthy eating. And obviously we've devoted a whole class to healthy eating. So that's something that I believe can make a difference. And, there's probably different pathways to achieve sort of a healthy pattern where we're all a little bit different in terms of what's going to work for us. But I'm going to highlight today some of the considerations that you might want to keep in mind when you're looking at making improvements to your diet. Usually a plan that you're able to stick with for the long haul is going to be the best plan for you. So we'll talk more about that definitely. Besides eating, regular activity is hugely important. And so activity can definitely affect our blood sugars. If you're living with diabetes, regular activity can go, it's one of those really important tools that you have besides food choices and medication and so forth. That activity can make a huge difference in blood sugars. And not just for diabetes, but lowering our risk of diabetes, controlling cholesterol, stress reduction. There's lots of good benefits to activity. So the advice that we should consider is maybe working our way up to about 150 minutes a week of regular aerobic activity. So that can be in bouts of 10 minutes or more. And I'm going to share with you a good resource, actually a really good video link a little bit later on that talks all about activity and some of the research around activity. Healthy body weight is another low-risk lifestyle behavior, just taking steps to try and improve body weight if you're carrying extra. And we'll definitely talk a little bit more about that today and some tips that can be helpful in that regard. Smoking cessation, that's another. If you're currently a smoker, quitting smoking, that might be one of the top things that you can do to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. So reaching out and getting help for that if that's a current goal of yours. Alcohol in moderation, managing stress, that's hugely important. And it's interesting when you look at how we respond to stress. A lot of times we're not sleeping and we're not eating properly, and we don't always take the time to exercise, and so they're all very much linked. And so sometimes thinking about ways to work in stress management, things that nurture our bodies, and kind of keep that stress level down a little bit through the day can make a difference in other areas, which is important. And then just getting enough sleep. We don't always think about sleep in the mix, but maybe trying to get that 6 to 8 hours in. So just thinking about a little bit of assessment where you fall in some of these different areas. And this might be just, it might help you to find a kind of that first step with where you want to go next. So with nutrition, there's a lot of different ideas when it comes to what's healthy and what isn't. I'm sure you've experienced that yourself and had different advice from different people. So we've tried to bring up some of the different ideas that people have expressed to us, and we'd like to shed a little bit of light and have a little bit of conversation about that. So my first myth or fact that I'm bringing up here is this statement: healthy eating means never eating desserts or sweets again. What do you think about that? I'll give you a second to think about whether you think that was a myth or maybe a fact. So we would say that's a myth, that really it's our day-to-day patterns that affect our health the most. It's not those small indulgences. So I really try and keep that 80-20 rule in mind. So it's kind of what we're doing 80% of the time that affects our health the most. It's maybe that double serving of cream in our coffee in the morning that's going to affect our blood sugar more often than that occasional dessert, that piece of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, right? So it's So those things we're doing often that we want to just put a little bit of thought into and make some simple changes. So what is healthy eating? Well, it's not a diet. We're really looking to try and make good quality food choices, healthier choices most of the time, trying to choose a variety of foods between different food groups and also within each food group. Just reaching out and trying new vegetables and fruit and just different choices, not getting stuck in the same old routine. I've said this before in some of the other classes, but just trying to get a schedule with eating. Having a regular schedule with your meals can make a really good difference in your overall energy levels, blood sugars, and just your tendency towards craving different foods and feeling over hungry. It can help with appetite control. So regardless, whether your day starts really early or later in the day, still trying to work in 3 meals a day if possible, breakfast, lunch, and supper. That can make a really big difference in a number of different ways. And of course, eating in moderation, right? Even healthy foods, sometimes we can go a little bit overboard with the portion. And definitely we want to keep those less nutritious foods in moderation and not get carried away with them. So the diet or the eating, I guess, healthy eating is meant to be somewhat flexible. And it's just trying to make the best choices we can most of the time, but still allowing a little bit of flexibility for other less nutritious foods now and again. So I don't know if any of you have been on a very restrictive diet in the past. There's all sorts of diets over the years that are promoted to help with our weight loss goals, and some of them can be very, very restrictive, and oftentimes people report, stepping on the scale in those first few days and being really encouraged with the weight that's coming off. But a lot of times that weight that's being lost initially is actually water weight, not fat weight, and it can really change our eating behavior. So what happens is our bodies are very efficient at adapting and we're built for survival. Our bodies are so complex. And sometimes what happens in response to an extreme calorie restriction, if we're just having a really small intake, is that we get our body adjusts, we get very hungry, and sometimes we crave foods that are not as nutritious. People can end up binge eating and just eating more in the long run, and sometimes regaining that weight back and even more. So what we're promoting, I guess, is an approach where it's sustainable. And so we've got the quote here, your body is for life, and we're not looking for a short-term diet. We want something that we can stick with and be happy with for the long haul. So I don't think I'd want to be on the diet that this guy is following. It doesn't look that exciting. So when we're talking about healthy eating, there's a variety of tools that we can use. And one useful tool is the Canada's Food Guide. And if you've seen some of the other versions over the years, the latest version looks a little bit different. And so the Canada's Food Guide now is just a one-page poster that looks like this. And there are also some other additional information that can be found on the Health Canada website itself. And so the link is at the bottom of this food guide. It's just canada.ca/food guide. There's all sorts of bits of information, but if we start off with just kind of what a healthy, balanced dinner plate would look like, there's actually quite a bit of information in this little interactive plate. So the first part you'll notice is that half the plate is very colorful, lots of vegetables and a little bit of fruit mixed in. For those of you that have attended the carbohydrate class for diabetes, this one's a little bit different. It has the fruit incorporated right in that side of the plate versus on the side, but it's just emphasizing more vegetables and fruit. And with diabetes, you will want to focus even more on the vegetables because they don't have as much natural sugars in them. Vegetables, with our vegetable intake, it can be fresh, it can be frozen, it can even be canned if it's canned without salt added, or at the very least, we give them a good rinse. So we're looking for fruit or vegetables without a lot of extra fat, sugar, or salt added to them. And so just really looking at getting lots of color on our dinner plate. There's just so many good nutrients that we're getting that way. And it can be very helpful for diabetes and for cholesterol and for weight management and just overall health. So that can be one challenge. I know a lot of us, when we sit down and really look at our dinner plates, the proportion is not quite the same as this for some of us. So it's always a good reminder, lots of vegetables, a little bit of fruit, just an important part of our diet. And then you'll see the other half of the plate is divided between the protein, which the protein section of the plate, you can see they've got meat, definitely. So I can see some looks like little cubes of steak and maybe there's some chicken and fish and an egg, but it also includes things that are not meat. So you could use things like chickpeas and kidney beans or nuts and seeds. Or things like tofu, and the new food guides also included things like yogurt and milk. And so these are good foods to pair with our meal. We want to keep whatever we're using for a protein food fairly lean. And I know I will talk a little bit more about the types of fats we get from some of our protein foods. I know having a bit of protein with our meal can help fill us up a little bit more, so we're not so hungry. And it can be helpful with managing blood sugar because we don't get such a quick rise in our blood sugar after we eat. So that's helpful for people that are doing some diabetes meal planning. The big part, I think, just in general for healthy eating is that we make sure that the portion size doesn't take up too much of our plate. So maybe about a quarter of our dinner plate, and that we're not choosing protein portions that are really fatty or adding a lot of oil and fats to our meat or protein. The other quarter of our plate is more the starchier section. It says choose whole grain foods. So it does look pretty brown on that side of the plate. You can see that the bread they've got on there looks more like a whole grain bread. It's, you know, not a white bread. I can see brown rice and pasta. I think that black portion must be some wild rice, and then that reddish part of the grain section, I believe, is quinoa. So they're really emphasizing the importance of really replacing the standard white refined products with more whole grains. And so that's obviously a real section of or emphasis of the food guide. So that's a big change. The last little part here I should mention, it says make water your drink of choice. And so we'll talk about that, but we need water and we really want to avoid having a lot of sugary beverages in our diet. So there's quite a bit there in that little food guide. We're starting off with making healthy choices. We want to think about just in general eating more nutrient dense foods. So here we've got two different meals. I'm going to say meals loosely. So the meal on our left hand side, chips and a Slurpee, and the Slurpee is 1.18 liters. And then on the right hand side, we've got a full meal, even with a bit of pie and a glass of milk. And would you be surprised if I told you they were roughly the same calories? When I first saw this, it did surprise me a little bit, and I double checked, and yeah, they were quite similar. And so this is why looking at just calories in your diet doesn't say a thing about the nutritional quality of your diet, right? I could have 700-800 calories worth of chips and Slurpees, but that's not going to improve my health. And so we really don't want to just look at calories. We want to look at just trying to make foods closer to nature, where there's less sugar and fat and salt to them, but they've got some good nutritional value to them. So you can see the meal on the right is probably going to fill you up and last a little bit longer than the chips and the Slurpee. It's going to give you some protein and a bit of fiber and vitamins. We just want to look at how often we're having really kind of nutrient dense foods, actual real food, and not relying on a lot of extra snacks to get us through the day. It's interesting knowing that, because this person, if you are often snacking on chips and drinking Slurpees through the day, it's kind of like you've added an extra meal in the day, right? Without even thinking about it. So definitely want to just look at how often some of those extra goodies are sneaking into your diet, because that could be having a really big impact on overall health. So again, it's that 80-20 rule. What am I doing 80% of the time? That's going to make a difference. So with foods closer to their natural state, talking about whole grains, there is more of an emphasis on just more fiber in our diets. And, fiber can have lots of great benefits. It can be useful in terms of blood sugar management, because foods with more fiber tend to have a much slower spike in your blood sugar after you eat. It can be helpful for managing blood cholesterol, because some types of fiber, and we've got them kind of broken up here. We've got the soluble fiber, which is especially good for cholesterol, and then the insoluble fiber, which is good for regularity, bowel health, right? Bowel function, helping to manage constipation. So essentially, we need both types. So we don't want to get too hung up on, which type of fiber am I eating? In general, I think a lot of us don't get enough, period. And a lot of foods are going to be a mix of both. If your goal is more to focus on weight management, foods that have got more fiber can be very helpful with helping to control hunger, and so that you're not going to have, the munchies so quickly after you eat, that it can help to give you that satiety or feeling of fullness for much longer. So in terms of fiber, they give a range. 25 grams is kind of the minimum. 25 to 35 grams, it depends on your age and gender, and but essentially, if you can try and work your way up to 25 grams a day, that's going to get you a whole lot closer to sort of a healthy fiber intake. If you're increasing your fiber, it's kind of like a workout for your digestive system. That's kind of how I think of it. So do a little bit at a time. Don't go from 3 grams of fiber a day up to 25 grams. That would take, your system needs to adjust a little bit. So you could just kind of gradually work your way up to the 25 to 35 grams a day. Just like you wouldn't start running for a marathon, in 2 days. You train a little bit. All right. So the food guide had talked about whole grains. And so this slide actually is just showing you the benefits that we get from different parts of the grain. This is a grain kernel on the right-hand side here. And you can see we've got the different layers distinguished here, defined. So that little green or brown section, that little brown strip in the middle of the grain, is called the germ. And this is what we're getting a lot of good nutritional benefit from. This is where we find the antioxidants that are so helpful for reducing our intake of chronic disease. We get some good vitamins and minerals in that part of the grain. The brown outer coating of the grain is where we find the fiber, and we also get some B vitamins and minerals, so that's also beneficial. And that big yellow part on the inside, that layer is called the endosperm, which gives us energy, gives us protein and carbohydrate and some vitamins. If we're mostly having refined products, that bran layer and that germ layer is getting stripped away, and so we're not getting the benefit of the whole grain. So you can see why they're really encouraging us to have more whole grains in our diet, because we're getting more nutritional benefit. So some simple examples would be things like oats, starting your day with oatmeal or choosing recipes that have oats incorporated into them. That's rich in that soluble fiber actually, and it's a whole grain. Barley, quinoa, brown rice or wild rice, trying to switch over from white to more brown and wild. Popcorn, thankfully, is a whole grain, but it's all the toppings that we put on the popcorn that can make it less healthy if we load lots of butter and salt on it. The plain popcorn itself is actually a whole grain. And then whole grain pastas and breads as well can be a source of whole grain. So we just want to think about, are there little changes that we can make in our day to gradually switch over to whole grains? And that can make a good difference. So when you are switching over, sometimes it's a little bit confusing because you can see claims on the package. It might say made with whole grains, and you're not really confident. Is there a lot of whole grains in this box or a little bit? I think the simplest thing to do is, as the slide says, check that list of ingredients. And those ingredients are listed in order by the amount in the package. So the very first ingredient is there in the largest amount. So we should be looking for a whole grain to be listed first on the package, not 4 or 5 down the ingredient list, if that makes sense. So you're looking for the word whole grain or whole or stone ground whole in front of the type of flour used, for example. This is a bread bag. And if we look at this ingredient list, the very first ingredient says enriched wheat flour. So I don't see the word whole or whole grain in front of that. So that's basically the number one ingredient is refined white flour. Quite a ways down the list, you can see it does say whole wheat flour. Now, what's interesting to note that in Canada, it is legal to advertise a food product as being whole wheat, but 70% of the grain can be stripped away and it can still be called, or sorry, not the grain, the germ. 70% of the germ can actually be removed, even though it says that it's whole wheat. And so what we want to do is we want to look for the claim 100% whole grain whole wheat. And I have seen this on food packages, on bread bags. So don't just go by whole wheat. It should say 100% whole grain whole wheat. And that would be a more nutritious choice because you can feel more confident knowing less of the germ has been stripped away. So hopefully that simplifies it for you. So fluid is important as well. So especially if you're going to start increasing your fiber, you want to make sure to drink more fluid along with that. So we know that fiber and fluid really go together, and so don't eat a lot more fiber and don't drink water. We need to make sure that we have both. So we need fluid. It's important in terms of digestion, keeping our digestive system going, as I mentioned. It helps with regulating a healthy body temperature as well. Yeah, it carries nutrients around in our body. There's lots of reasons why we need some fluid every day. And the recommendation for fluid is 9 to 12 cups a day. So that doesn't necessarily have to be 9 to 12 cups of water a day. Water is one of the best fluid choices, but that also includes the cup of tea you might have, or unsweetened coffee or juice or soup or that kind of thing. But more of that definitely you want to be coming from water. And so this is for some people this is challenging. If you're somebody that doesn't like to drink water, that can be difficult. So you want to try and build some reminders into your day to drink. I know a lot of times, if you can always have a water pitcher on the table with your meals. Tell yourself, I'm going to have a big glass of water with every meal. Maybe carry a water bottle with you when you're out and about, and then at least you can quantify how much you're drinking if you've measured it out into a water bottle. I know some people, if you're a visual person, some people, if it's important, some people feel it works well to set an alert on their phone that pops up, or just a little sticky note somewhere, you know, that says drink. Make sure that you know that's water, but you know, or water or something. Um, so yeah, it's kind of just trying to build some cues into your day so that you don't go the whole day and all of a sudden think, oh my goodness, I haven't had anything to drink. And so that can sometimes make you a little bit more successful. So yes, you want to ensure you're drinking adequate fluid when you're increasing your fiber intake. So along the way, when you're increasing your fluid intake, make sure that's not coming from sugary drinks. We know that sugary drinks can be really hard on your blood sugar, for one, if you're living with diabetes. It can also be hard on your cholesterol, which people don't always know about. It can also make weight loss a lot more difficult as well. So we want to limit things like pop, juice, iced tea, specialty coffees, those those coffees that have whipped cream and lots of sugary ingredients. Those are things really not to have on a regular basis. So more often, again, water and maybe some milk, or soy milk or soy beverage is an alternative. And then once in a while, if you feel like a sweetened drink, I mean, there are lower sugar alternatives that use an artificial sweetener if you like. Things like the little flavored crystals called Crystal Light that you can put into your water, or you can add it to club soda, or choosing a diet pop rather than a regular pop if it's a treat, a night out. But more often we want to be choosing more of water and milk. So we don't want to drink our meal's worth of calories. And so again, as I mentioned, it's not just looking at our dinner plate. There's lots of different aspects of healthy eating that the Health Canada site has got lots of interactive and good ideas that that if you'd like, definitely have a look. Things like being mindful of your eating habits. If you go to the site canada.ca/food guide, you could click on that section and it will give you tips on how to be mindful of your eating habits, avoiding distractions while you're eating, and just being really present. Cooking more often at home, that can make such a difference in terms of the quality of your diet. It's difficult to manage to get enough fiber and to limit your sodium and sugars if you heavily rely on eating out. So again, it's, if you can think about eating at home more often, and then doing some of that prep work ahead of time to allow yourself to be able to eat more home cooked meals if it's a crazy busy day. A little bit of planning ahead of time can kind of work around some of those challenges sometimes. There's a lot of information, and do have a look at it. They've got tips on reading labels and looking at things like sodium in your diet and so forth. So do have a look. Now, in terms of cholesterol, we did want to talk about fats and cholesterol in our diet. And just looking at the quality of fats that we're eating can definitely have an impact on our blood cholesterol levels, which is important to know about. So obviously the avocado here, we see he's a very good fat, or she, and is definitely showing off. So we'll talk a little bit about why why that avocado was able to feel so superior. What about cholesterol? So when I use the word cholesterol, there's different ways, different types of cholesterol, I guess I would say. Our liver actually produces cholesterol, so we make some cholesterol in our liver, and so do animals. They produce cholesterol from their liver. So we only find cholesterol in our diet from animal products. So we make some naturally, and some of us make more than others, just genetically, but we also produce more cholesterol in our livers based on the food choices we make day to day. And we do need some cholesterol. It's important in being able to activate vitamin D in our body and in hormone production. So we need some cholesterol, but Negative health impacts occur when we've got an imbalance of the different types of cholesterol, and we will talk about those today. So we make cholesterol and we also consume it from the food that we eat. And you'll notice that when I'm talking about food choices and how they affect cholesterol, I'm going to put a greater emphasis on actually the types of fat versus the dietary cholesterol. Saturated fat and another type of fat called trans fat have a bigger impact on our blood cholesterol levels. And so that's where a lot of the diet information will focus on through this next part of the presentation. So again, dietary cholesterol, we only find it in animal products. So meat, poultry, eggs, and milk. And again, it's too much saturated in trans fat that are the dietary components that can cause our liver to make too much cholesterol. Okay, some of you might have had your cholesterol measured and had a conversation with your healthcare provider about what those numbers mean. And for some of you, maybe it's kind of foggy. So I just thought I'll review the different types and we'll go through that together. So when your cholesterol is measured, there are different parts that they're looking at, which tell us a different story in terms of your cardiovascular risk. And so there is a cholesterol called good cholesterol or healthy cholesterol. And this is the one that on your lab results, it would say HDL. And HDL stands for a big long word, high density lipoprotein, but you're not going to remember that. I always say H stands for healthy, right? You'll remember that. Healthy cholesterol, we want a greater amount of healthy cholesterol in our blood. Healthy, high levels decrease our risk of cardiovascular disease. I kind of equate it to like a little vacuum cleaner of these healthy cholesterol carriers going around and clearing up debris in our vessels. So that's kind of my visual that I use to make sense of this cholesterol information. We've also got bad cholesterol in our blood as well. And this is the LDL cholesterol that would show up on your lab results. And so again, LDL stands for low density lipoprotein, but you can remember that L stands for lousy, and that'll be easier to remember. Lousy cholesterol is linked definitely with cardiovascular disease. So the higher the LDL, the greater the cardiovascular risk. And definitely diet and lifestyle can have an impact. So we will be spending some time talking about this today. Again, to use a visual, I kind of think about the LDL carrier, the LDL lipoproteins, as being like a really inefficient garbage truck, you know, driving around in your vessels and dropping off garbage and debris wherever it goes. So the more of these carriers you have, the less healthy it is for your vessels. So we want less of the lousy LDL. And then the other reading that we're interested in is called triglycerides, which is a type of fat in your blood. And we know that high levels are also carrying increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So we want to make sure that we're carrying about with a healthy diet that can have a positive effect on these cholesterol levels. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So in terms of fats in our diet, not all fats created equal. So fat's an important part of our diet, but we definitely need to look at the quality and be just watching how much fat we're adding to our food and consuming. So with fats, we've got the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good fat, we'll talk about those. Those are fats that are beneficial for our heart health. So we want to look at ways to increase the good fats in our diet. The bad fats are what we're referring to as the saturated fats. And the worst fat, the ugly fat, is called the trans fat, which thankfully the food industry regulations have changed. And this should be less of a problem in the future. And even starting now, it's definitely improving, which is a huge step forward in the world of nutrition. So anybody get this picture? The good, the bad, and the ugly? That always makes me smile. So So what about the good fats? So the good fat are what we're going to call unsaturated fat. Somebody coined it to me this way once, and I thought, oh, that's an easy way to remember. Good fat is a fat that swims or grows. So that includes things like nuts and seeds, which would grow. It includes things and products made from nuts and seeds, right? Things like peanut butter. We've got things like oils, canola oil, olive oil. There's a variety of other oils that are healthy: soybeans, sunflower, corn oil, sunflower seeds. And then things that swim would be fish. And the fatty fish that we have listed here is specifically listed because it's higher in these certain type of unsaturated fats. The omega-3 fats, they're very healthy. If you like having other types of fish, you like to go fishing, and maybe you like to eat walleye, or maybe just a different kind of fish like tilapia, definitely enjoy that. All fish, I think, is going to be a really great addition to your diet. These ones are just a little bit richer in those heart healthy fats. But any kind of fish, just make sure it's not battered and fried, because that kind of defeats a bit of the purpose. So salmon, halibut, herring, mackerel, rainbow trout, and tuna. Those are kind of the top of the list. So little changes like, swapping out your ham sandwich for maybe a tuna sandwich or a salmon sandwich. That could be a source of healthy fats in your diet. That could make a big difference over time. So other tips, just making sure that whatever fat source you're using for your baking or your cooking, that it's more of a heart healthy oil. So we've used olive oil or canola oil as a few examples. Something that we don't always think to add to our salads or even in a sandwich actually is avocado, which is very rich in healthy fats. And it's nice to even put on a cracker or slice it up, even plain. It's rich in healthy fats. We can use natural peanut butter as a protein choice, which is great. The most natural, I guess, is just the peanuts, and it doesn't have icing sugar or salt added, and it's the kind of peanut butter with the oil that you would mix. And so that can be a really heart healthy choice. More fish, 2 to 3 servings a week. So not just fish once in a while, but really thinking every week, how can I work some fish into my diet? And so like I said, it could be something as simple. One of your fish meals could be just a tuna sandwich, right? Just working in that way. And then if you had another kind of fish meal for the week, you have your 2 servings right there. You could try working more nuts into your diet. And using them regularly. They're actually a really heart health addition to our diet. So have nuts as a snack, add them to your salad, add them in with your cereal or your porridge. Every day, think about, just a small portion of nuts. And of course, the unsalted nuts would be the best choice. And just keep that portion small. No more than 1/3 of a cup of nuts. Otherwise, the calories can really get away from you. They're quite rich and concentrated in energy, but they've got lots of great nutritional benefits. So something that definitely is a good thing to add to your diet. And then possibly you could add ground flax to your yogurt or to your cereal, in with your baking or in with your oatmeal, or your cooking. And so little changes like that can definitely have a big impact on the overall quality of your diet. Bad fats tend to come from animal products, and so saturated fats are linked with increased LDL, which is that bad cholesterol. And so sources of saturated fat can be anything that's processed, some of those processed luncheon meats, deli meats, cookies and crackers in a box. There's all sorts of sources. Once you start label reading, things that are not prepared at home that we buy out of a box or package, may be a source of saturated fat. So definitely good to read those labels. And we will talk about what to be looking for on the label in just a few moments. Coconut oil, lard, butter, High-fat dairy like whipping cream, full-fat cheeses, homogenized milk would be higher in saturated fat, and fatty meats, things like you can see the meat on the burger and in the bacon. So yeah, these are things that we definitely want to cut back our intake of. And this is an area of confusion for people because there are all sorts of different studies that they release, and you hear about them on the news or on TV or on the internet, and it can be a bit daunting to know what's the best advice to follow. But we do know that saturated fat can have an impact on our bad cholesterol, which increases cardiovascular disease. So anything that can raise our LDL, we want to be limiting. So, and I'll show you a little chart here that illustrates this. So this chart, I don't want to get too into detail. It looks quite technical, but it's just showing some common oils in our diet. So it lists everything from canola oil, safflower. At the very bottom, it lists coconut oil. And so the red bars, I just want you to really focus on the red bars. You can see that coconut oil had the largest percentage of the saturated fat. Coconut oil and butter, palm oil and lard, all the oils had some, but you know, the palm oil, the butter, the coconut oil, and the lard, those were the highest. And so we really aren't recommending that people use coconut oil regularly. If it's a once in a while recipe that has a great flavor that you like in that recipe, I mean, that's a little different. But if you're using it intentionally to improve cholesterol, that's probably not the best strategy. Okay, it does have more of an effect on the LDL, which we're really focused on, as compared to something like a canola oil or sunflower oil and that kind of thing. Same thing with butter. Butter is higher in saturated fat, you can see. So we really want to try and limit our saturated fat as much as we're able to. Those other bars are the healthier fats in our diet that can have a positive effect on our blood cholesterol levels. The really ugly fat is called trans fat. And this is the fat that I was saying the food industry has had to make some changes, thankfully. So the trans fat is the so-called ugly fat because it actually raises our bad cholesterol and it brings down our good cholesterol. So that really has a double whammy effect. So it is a more harmful fat, is the trans fat that's produced through food manufacturing. And so this trans fat was produced through the process of hydrogenation. So a byproduct of that, it really changed the structure of the fat, sort of a healthy fat into a less healthy fat. And so foods that had this hydrogenation in them, hydrogenated margarine, or partially hydrogenated shortening, foods that were deep fried, or cookies and crackers, and croissants and things perhaps, could have had trans fat in them. But now, in 2018, Health Canada has officially banned trans fat from the food supply. And they were given a bit of a grace period. So, you still might see some items with trans fat on the shelf if they were produced before the ban came into effect. But within 3 years, hopefully we really won't be seeing a lot of these foods with trans fat in them. So that's really good news. Okay, so myth or fact? Margarine is one molecule away from plastic. What would you say to this one? Would you say that's a myth, or would you say that's truly a fact? Usually if we were in class together in person, there's 2 camps and people feel quite strongly one way or the other. But the answer to that is I'm going to say that's a myth. Margarine is actually made out of vegetable oil, and it can be much lower in saturated fat, but you should choose wisely and choose carefully because there are high quality margarines and margarines that are not quite as heart healthy. So what we're going to look for is the word non-hydrogenated when we're picking up a margarine. And so There are brands that we're very familiar with that are non-hydrogenated. So an example that I can think of is Becel, sorry. Becel has lots of different varieties of margarine, and they've got lots of non-hydrogenated margarine options. But there are no-name brands as well that are very similar. And so as long as that margarine is soft and spreadable, and it says the word non-hydrogenated, that's going to be a better choice. That'll be a much more heart healthy than using a hard margarine or using butter or using coconut oil. So should you use butter or should you use margarine? First of all, use less of both. So whatever you're using, try to limit so that you're not always adding much more than 2 to 3 tablespoons a day of that fat spread, because it's really giving us a lot of additional calories that are often just over and above what we're needing if we get carried away with the portion. Again, choose a soft, non-hydrogenated type. And the margarine should say 0 grams of trans fat, and it should have as little saturated fat as possible. So most of them will have a little bit of saturated fat, these non-hydrogenated margarines, just to make a solid, spreadable product. So it's not unusual to see a heart healthy, non-hydrogenated margarine with maybe 1 gram of saturated fat. But yeah, that's you want to choose the lowest number that's available to you in that regard. You can see butter's got quite a bit more saturated fat in the same size portion. So butter, you know, if it's the shortbread cookies at Christmas and you got to use butter, once in a while it can fit, but you don't want to be using it every day for your main fat spread. So for those of you that are label reading, this is where you find that information. So right underneath the total fat amount, it breaks down the two unhealthy fats, the saturated and trans fat, are listed right below there. And so that's where you find that fat information. And so we'll look at labels in different ways. I know in terms of carbohydrate, for those of you that have been through the diabetes series of classes, we look heavily at grams of carbohydrate. But for everything else, I'm going to talk more about the other part of the label, which is this far right-hand column called percent daily value. And the percent daily value is a scale that helps you to see if something has a little or a lot of a nutrient. Rather than walk into the grocery store trying to, excuse me, trying to remember how many milligrams or grams am I supposed to be eating of sodium and fiber and saturated and trans fat and calcium and iron, and that can just be overwhelming. So if we can remember 2 numbers, we can use this scale much more efficiently. So the way that this percent daily value works, the kind of recommended amounts for the different nutrients based on a 2,000 calorie diet are all kind of worked in. So they're thinking that this should supply a good cross section of the population. And they've set a scale so that 5% of my daily value is a little, and 15% of my daily value or more is a lot. And so we'll look at some examples here in just a moment. This is just showing you the nutrition panels, kind of some of the changes to expect. And you've probably maybe noticed that the food labels have started looking a little bit different lately. So back in 2017 is when the changes had started, and the food companies have 5 years or so to make these changes. So the first thing, just to let you know, you'll see that the serving size stands out a little bit more, and it's similar on similar foods. So they would all say the same thing, per cup, 250 mils. It wouldn't be different on different food packages. They've done some formatting and whatnot. They've actually added some percent daily values for some nutrients that they didn't have on there before. So they've got a percent daily values for sugars. And so again, for things like sugar, for things that we're trying to cut back our intake of, like sugars, as well as the saturated and trans fat and sodium, we really want to keep the food packages that we buy, we want to aim for less than 15% of our daily value, because that's kind of the cutoff for a high amount, right? 15% is a lot. The new labels as well, you can see at the very bottom in small print, it shows, it talks about those daily value cutoffs. 5% is a little, 15% of my daily value is a lot. And they've added extra nutrients of concern because some people are needing to be more aware of their potassium intake or calcium intake or iron for various health reasons. So there's more detail. It's a little bit different formatting, and they've added some changes in terms of the percent daily value results that are included. Okay, so if we're using the percent daily value information, and by the way, I'll just mention that percent daily value handout, there is a handout here with this percent daily value picture on it, and it's in that package of handouts that you have. So you have this to take home, and it does walk you through some of these main points. So in general, we want to be choosing less sodium, less saturated and trans fat. And now with the new labels, we want less sugar. We want to be choosing more. So things that we might want our percent daily value to be 15% or greater would be things like fiber, calcium, iron, and vitamins and so forth. So so that's just kind of a review there, a bit of a rewind. So if we remember that 5% of my daily value is a little, 15% of my daily value is a lot, hopefully we can find it a little bit easier to make healthy choices. So here we've got an example, and it's a package of crackers. We've got two different cracker options. So let's just take a moment and have a look and see which cracker we would choose. So the cracker on the left-hand side, if we're using that percent daily value system, the things that we want to evaluate are the saturated and trans fat. So you can see that the percent daily value for saturated fat and trans fat are listed together here. And then on the cracker, we'll call this one cracker A on the left-hand side. So it's got 13% of my daily value for the bad fats. The cracker B on the right only has 2% of my daily value. What about sodium? Cracker A has got 12%, which is getting close to that upper level of the 15%, but it's still within target. Cracker B's only got 4%, so it's much lower in sodium. Cracker A's only got 4% of my daily value for fiber, and that, remember, we said anything that's 5% of my daily value or less is low, so that would be a low fiber cracker. Cracker B has got 12%. So if I think about some of the heart healthy options that I want to be thinking about when I'm planning my food choices, I want less, of the bad fats, so less saturated fat, less sodium, and maybe more fiber. Cracker B would win, right? That would be the cracker I would pick off the shelf to include more often. So that's kind of how that system works. With diabetes, again, I just want to emphasize that for when you're looking at strategically planning your meals to count the carbohydrates when you're carb counting for diabetes blood sugar management, that's the one case I would say it's much more important to look at the grams of carbohydrate in that situation versus the percentage, because in that case we are needing to be a lot more specific with how much we're eating per sitting versus per day. But for everything else, when you're quickly comparing a package for sodium and fiber and fats and so forth, you can use that percent daily value as a really quick comparison tool. And it just kind of hopefully helps to simplify things a bit. And so some of these labels, I'll just go back to the labels. Some of them will list sugar underneath the carbohydrates on the food label. And so with the sugars on the label, just kind of a heads up that some of that sugar is actually listed, is actually naturally occurring sugar. So for example, in a glass of milk, there would be sugars listed on the label, even though it's just plain white milk, because milk has naturally occurring milk sugar called lactose. And fruit, without extra sugar added to it, sugars would be listed as well, because fruit has naturally occurring fruit sugar in it called fructose. So that sugars that is listed on the fruit label includes this naturally occurring sugar, and it also includes added sugar, like when honey is added, or glucose or molasses. And so it actually includes both types together. It doesn't differentiate them. And the problem with sugar is research shows that high sugar diets is linked with heart disease, stroke, obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol, cancer, and cavities. So definitely looking at sugars on the label is something that can give you a bit of clue as far as the nutritional quality of the product. If it's if the sugar percent daily value is high, it may be an option that maybe isn't quite as good of a healthy of a choice. So we're trying to keep those sugars on the package to less than 15% daily value, just like sodium, just like saturated and trans fat. So under 15% daily value for the sugars. And for those of you that are carb counting for diabetes, again, don't disregard the grams of sugar on the label when you're carb counting, because that sugar is already included in the carbs, for those of you that need to quantify the amount of carbs you're eating at a meal. So this is where you'll see that percent daily value for the sugars listed. So underneath the carbs, you'll see it's got the sugars listed. So again, this would be a high sugar choice because it says 22% of my daily value. And again, at the bottom, you can see it says 5% is a little, 15% or more is a lot. So this would be a high sugar choice. So hopefully there would be a better option on the shelf a little bit further down. You will likely see, as you go down the grocery aisle, you'll likely see a lot of different claims on the package that mean sugar, or refer to sugar. So, you might see no sugar added, or reduced in sugar, or unsweetened, or sugar-free. And if you have questions on those, I won't go through those today, but definitely you can bring them up with the dietitian and we can talk more about it when we see you in person. But I think in general, for those of you that are carb counting, if you're living with diabetes, just continue to look at the carbs on the label to see how that food will affect your blood sugar. And for everyone else, and just if you're looking at the nutritional quality of the food, you can use the percent daily value just to see if it's got a little or a lot of sugars in general. So hopefully that's clear. If you have, like I said, if you have any questions, sometimes that one-on-one visit with the dietitian helps to kind of clarify some of that. All right, so we talked about things that you can add to your diet, things like fiber, things like those healthy fats, which are found in fish and nuts and seeds and those type of products. There's also another part of our diet that you could consider. There's actually a type of vegetable fat that is found in a lot of different foods naturally, things like nuts and seeds and oils and so forth, and fruit and vegetables. And these are called plant sterols, and plant sterols are found naturally, but it's hard to consume enough to have an impact on our blood cholesterol levels. And what plant sterols can do is they can partly block the absorption of cholesterol, in our intestine, and in fact can help lower the LDL, which is our bad cholesterol. And so Health Canada has allowed the addition of plant sterols to certain foods for people that are wanting to include them specifically for the purpose of lowering blood cholesterol levels. And so they are allowed to be added to things like margarine and yogurt products and juices and things. So you can see right on the label, so this would not be a regular yogurt or margarine or juice. You could see right on the label, you would look for the words plant sterols or plant, oh, there's other terms for sterols. I'm just looking at the margarine tub that we have in front of us here. It says Becel Proactive with plant sterols, which help lower cholesterol. These products, now there is a measured dosage that's recommended. And so it isn't something that you would use this specially enriched margarine in your muffin recipe and kind of throughout the day. The measured dosage of plant sterols recommended would be 2 to 3 grams a day. And so one serving of that food product might give you 1 gram of plant sterols. So in that case, you would need 2 or 3 servings a day. So it's a measured dosage. Some of these products tend to be a little bit more expensive. So they're not a product that you would share with the whole family, for example. It's just for the person that's wanting to strategically include more plant sterols to improve their cholesterol. So if that's something that interests you, definitely have a look at your grocery store, see if they offer any of those plant sterol enriched products. Practically speaking, I haven't always seen that these things are stocked regularly on the shelves in the grocery store. So sometimes they're a bit hard to find. So you might have to shop around a little bit to see if, you know, some of the other grocery stores would carry them. Health Canada, actually on their website, they've got a little write-up on plant sterols with frequently asked questions that people have. So if you have any questions, you can definitely go to that site and do a little bit of searching there. And it's always wise to talk to your doctor, especially if you're taking cholesterol medication. The doctor might want to double check your cholesterol levels over time to see if any medication adjustments are needed, and just to keep them apprised of what you're doing. So that's something you might not have noticed on the shelf or heard of before, but that can have an impact on LDL as well. So, all right. We also, when we're talking about healthy eating, we also want to look at eating in a way that's going to be healthy for our blood pressure. Too much pressure on our vessels over time is not healthy for our heart or just healthy for our blood vessels. And definitely diet can have an impact on our blood pressure, among other things like smoking and stress and whatnot. Sodium intake or salt intake can definitely have an impact, as well as alcohol. So we do want to make sure that we're careful with these parts of our diet. So here's another myth or fact for you. Most of the sodium in our diet can be removed by taking the salt shaker off the table. What would you say to that one? Is that a myth or a fact? That's actually a myth. And sometimes people are surprised by that, that it is good to use less salt at the table, but actually 3/4 of the salt in our diet comes from restaurant foods and packaged foods. So it doesn't go quite far enough to just use less salt at the table. We need to be looking at how often we're eating out and just looking at those food packages to see, you know, if there's some items that we're having on a regular basis that are really high sodium. And so I'm going to just compare different foods with how much sodium they have. And just to give you a little bit of a context to it, a daily limit of sodium should be less than 2,300 milligrams a day. And so let's have a look at some of the common foods that we eat from day to day. So a chicken breast would naturally have some sodium, so 140 milligrams a day. And remember, we said 2,300 is kind of the daily limit, so it's not extremely high in sodium, but it has some. How about if that chicken is made into a chicken pot pie, right? We buy a frozen chicken pot pie from the grocery store. It's quite a bit higher, right? So we've got, you can imagine that there would be probably some soup mix in there and some salt in the crust. So we've got 907 milligrams of sodium. How about a bowl of soup, canned soup, or dried soup? Wow, that one was really high. So, 1100 milligrams of sodium. It's not really that outrageous. There's a lot of soups that you would buy on the shelf that would be close to 1,000 milligrams of sodium in a serving. And so the good news is there's often some lower sodium choices, but you do want to use that label to compare. And if you do have an option to maybe make a batch of soup on a slower day and freeze the leftovers, that's even better. And then you can control exactly what's going into that soup. What about the fast food chicken dinner? How much sodium do you think that would have? You can probably guess it's probably quite a bit. Wow, so 2,243 milligrams of sodium. And so, yeah, that's pretty well your daily limit. Remember we said 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day was the limit. So if this was a type of meal that you had once every 6 months and you did it when the kids came down for a visit and got some, fast food chicken dinner, that's not going to affect your health as much as if it was a weekly occurrence where you went there every week to have that meal. So again, we're just looking at the things we do most often, and maybe there's some substitutions that we can make. So I gave you the limit of 2,300 milligrams, and this is a recommendation to prevent high blood pressure. And so that's about the equivalent of 1 teaspoon of table salt. If you already have high blood pressure, you may want to aim to the lower end of the range, even to 1,500 milligrams a day. So it would be wise to start looking at the sodium on the food labels, just like with everything else. And so it can be quite eye-opening. And you can use that same, I'll just go back here. We've been talking about milligrams of sodium in the examples, but you can still use that percent daily value when you're comparing labels to make it a little simpler. Keep it under 15% of your daily value for the different food choices or food packages that you're buying per serving. So that might keep it simple. And you do actually have information in your folder on making lower sodium choices as well. So, okay, another aspect of those low risk lifestyle behaviors that we talked about was healthy weight. And weight is definitely a part of healthy lifestyle. The amount of weight loss that can be beneficial, sometimes people are surprised that research shows even losing 5 to 10% of your starting body weight can make huge or can have huge benefits in terms of reducing your risk of chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes and blood pressure, and just even making them easier to manage. So that could be somebody who weighs 200 pounds, losing 5 to 10% of their initial body weight would be losing 10 to 20 pounds, and keeping that weight off for the long haul. Sometimes you're a lot further ahead than saying, I want to aim for 50 pounds weight loss, and then you lose 50, and then you gain it all back and then some. So small changes that are sustained over time can have a huge impact on overall health. We also know that where we carry our weight can also have health implications. And so that fat stored around the abdomen, kind of that apple shape, is what can put us at risk for higher blood pressure, higher cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. And so it is important to know kind of where you fit within that category as well. And so in terms of, they call this your waist circumference, but if you're curious to see where you lie, where your waist circumference would lie, the recommendation is less than 40 inches for men and less than 35 inches for women. And so that's kind of the ultimate goal. So even if your weight is kind of roughly around where your doctor is happy with, but your waist circumference is above those recommended targets, you may want to put a little bit of thought into lifestyle and if there's any positive changes you can make. And I would say on the flip side of that is sometimes people make great changes and are a little bit frustrated that the number on the scale isn't changing um, as quickly as they'd like, but they are noticing that they're losing inches, and that's a huge health benefit. So don't discount the benefits of losing inches. And so it's not just pounds on the scale. If you're interested to know kind of where you stand and you'd like to measure your own weight in the comfort of your own home, we've got a link to the Heart and Stroke Foundation at the very bottom in red. And so it's got a little video that shows you how to measure properly so that you know kind of the proper steps and how to do that. So just another angle to think about. When you're setting weight loss goals as well, there's a few things we want to think about. So obviously you want to think about your weight in context of your overall health. So is it having an impact on things like your blood sugar and your blood pressure? Has your doctor expressed concern about where your weight is currently? What has been your weight history over the last 10 to 20 years? So that's always good to consider. You know, your lowest weight that you've carried as an adult over the last 10 years, that might be a good place to start in terms of a goal for realistic weight loss, right? So, and that's a weight that you carried while you were not exercising 5 hours a day and eating nothing but celery, right? This is a weight that you had a reasonably good quality of life. You didn't feel overly deprived. Um, and so what has been the lowest weight as an adult that you've been? And how does my current lifestyle support my goals for weight? And so again, we just want to really make sure that we're making realistic and sustainable changes when we're talking about weight. So there comes a point, we've got a quote here from a doctor, Dr. Sharma, and he does a lot of work in the area of weight loss, and he works at the BC Clinic in Edmonton. And he's coined a term called best weight. And in one of his books called Best Weight, he states, there comes a point when a person cannot eat less or exercise more and still like their life. So the weight that they attain while still liking their life is thus their best weight. So it's probably a lifestyle change that you're able to maintain over the long haul, which makes it a better goal, right? So that's just a little different way of thinking about maybe what a healthy and realistic weight loss goal might be. And so you've probably collected a lot of information on what works for you over time. These are just some little tips that others have shared that have been beneficial when making healthy food choice changes. So I thought I would share them with you today. Sometimes these little changes can make a great difference. So first one, it says plate foods you want to increase first. So I'm not sure if you've heard of that one before, but so if your goal is to increase your intake of vegetables, this would mean that when you dish up your plate, you dish up the salad and the vegetables first. And then you're more likely to fill more of your plate with veggies versus if you were to put the meat or the potatoes on your plate. So that's one thing you could try. The other thing is out of sight, out of mind. That one's probably fairly explanatory. So if chips and chocolate bars are kind of your nemesis, it's best not to have them right in plain sight by your chair or right on the counter where you can see them. So we want to keep those things less accessible, not have them in plain view, and even probably better to keep them out of the house where we're not regularly stocking them if they're a food that is hard to limit. The flip side of that is to keep healthy foods prepared and accessible. So, you could do a little experiment with yourself or your family. One day, pay special attention. How much fruit or veggies gets eaten when it's just kept in that crisper drawer of your refrigerator? Right? Maybe another day you could wash the fruit and put it out in a little fruit bowl. And another day, why don't you just, even go further and slice it up and put some forks around that plate, right? Or have the veggies all sliced up and just sitting out on the counter, and see how quickly it disappears. So the more prepared, the more accessible things are, the more likely we are to eat them. Eliminating distractions is another. And so in the world we live in, uh, sometimes can feel like we're in fast forward. And a lot of times people aren't always present when they're eating. And I kind of alluded to this earlier when I was talking about the food guide, but so distractions can be anything from having the television on during a meal, or having your cell phone beside you at the table, checking your emails over your lunch break. The problem with distractions is often we're not even aware how much we're eating. When our attention is taken elsewhere, we don't realize quite when we're full, when we're looking at other things. So just making a special effort to really be present and mindful of when we're sitting down to a meal, and protecting that time so that there aren't other tasks being done, can have a positive impact on our eating behavior. So that's another thought. We can also try to use smaller plates just as a simple portion control method. I was shocked the last time I bought dinner plates, and it's been a little while now, but the last time I bought dinner plates, I was shocked at how big some of the plates had gotten. It was almost like a platter, the dinner size plate. So using more the side plate as the dinner plate for my meal, that was a much healthier portion than filling up the plate that was in front of me, which was quite a bit bigger. And it's interesting to see how even the sizes of the dinner plates have changed over the years and gotten much bigger. And the last point is just to keep a food diary, keep track of what we're eating. Sometimes just building that awareness into what we're doing can help us to make changes. We can't really change what we don't acknowledge and what we're not aware of. And so keeping a bit of a record of what we're doing sometimes makes us aware of where we need to maybe start with some of the healthy lifestyle changes. And planning a menu, I think, is huge. It's very difficult to have a healthy meal on the table when it's, a really hectic, busy day, if you haven't put any preparation or thought into it earlier in the day or the week. So just trying to set yourself up for success with a little bit of planning and some awareness can make a difference for sure. So yeah, it's certainly not easy. So getting back to portion size, which plate do you think would have the most food? This is a little quiz. Right, so you've probably guessed it. Oops, sorry, but they're all the same size. And so this is just showing you that, that bigger dinner plate, that healthy portion looks so tiny because the plate is so huge. And human nature is we would tend to want to fill the plate up that's bigger. So just trying to use a smaller plate is just a kind of a simple method to try and manage portions. So it's a little trick of the eye. We haven't talked about exercise throughout this presentation, or physical activity, I should say. Just wanted to mention that there's an excellent video, and if you were in class in person, sometimes we show this video, but today I'll just reference the link for you, and you can look it up on your computer. So if you were to go to a YouTube link and just search for the video that's called 23.5 hours, and it's by a Dr. Mike Evans out of the States. And he does a fantastic job of researching all the great information on activity. And he just phrases it in such a meaningful way that I think every time I watch it, I learn something new from it and I feel inspired. So if you've never seen that video before, I'd encourage you to watch it. I think it's only like 10 to 15 minutes at maximum. It's not terribly long, but do have a look at it because it does have some unique challenges to it. And I just really think it's kind of inspiring and kind of a different way of thinking about activity that can sometimes get you going in the right direction. So have a look if you've got some time. So that is kind of the content of the class that we had covered today. Hopefully you picked up some good tips. The next step is just thinking, now that I've got this information, are there any changes that I can make to be healthy? So you want to set a goal of your own. Excuse me. So you might want to go back to that original self-assessment sheet that you filled out. And just have a look, you know, maybe the main concern was some of the salty snacks, or maybe it was sugary drinks, or maybe it was activity. So I just encourage you that with whatever goal you're making in terms of health change, that you make it very specific. So, and also realistic. So a goal that's kind of vague, if you were saying, you know, I think my goal is to increase my exercise, my activity, that's pretty broad, and you're probably less likely to make a change versus if you were to make that goal a little bit more specific and measurable, you know, and achievable and realistic and timely. So we call those SMART goals. So perhaps you could set a goal to say, I plan to walk 30 minutes a week in the evenings, 3 days a week. Or sorry, 30 minutes a week isn't much. That was a bad goal. 30 minutes 3 times a week in the evenings might be the goal that I would make. I would be more successful than if I just said I'm going to increase my activity and was sort of vague with it. So just putting a little bit of thought into some of that, some of the next steps would be helpful. You do in your package of information have a much more detailed list of healthy eating resources. We've got anything from food tracking apps to websites to some that have got great recipes. And so the handout that you would have gotten in your package includes the links and so forth. So have a look if you're feeling like you'd like some more online support. These are sites that we would recommend as being more reputable. And you do have that list in your package of information. So that's available to you. Now, as far as what's next in the program, so if you're attending, if this is the only class that you were booked to attend, or you haven't been booked with a dietitian before, definitely we'd love to see you. And so for those of you also that are coming through the diabetes program and you've been to the carbs class and now you've been to the healthy lifestyles class, we'd love to see you individually. And so that can be arranged by calling Patient Education at 694-0230. Some of you might have already had that visit set up. So if it is already, that's great. If you haven't and you'd like to see a dietitian individually, we'd love to see you. Same thing with the heart-to-heart classes. The next step would be to carry on and finish the heart-to-heart classes that you're scheduled for. And as well, if you'd like to see the dietitian, we'd love to see you as well. So just, you can arrange that through Patient Education at that same number. There's also some other great classes in the community that run at various times throughout the year. So if you're interested, definitely you can call and inquire about these programs and kind of when they're running. There is a program called Live Well, and Live Well is a wonderful program with lots of great research and lots of great feedback actually we've had on it. And I've got the pamphlet in front of me. You might have seen it, or maybe it's in some of the resources you were given previously, but it is a workshop that is run over 6 weeks by trained volunteers. And the volunteers are people who live with chronic conditions themselves, and the class is for people with chronic conditions. So it could be anything from diabetes, it could be heart disease, it could be MS, it could be fibromyalgia. So it's just you know, if you're living with any kind of chronic condition and you're wanting a bit more support, they talk more about practical ways to deal with pain, it says, and fatigue, discover better nutrition and exercise choices, learn how to talk to your doctor, setting proper goals, just kind of changing the mindset there. And it's been very well received. So definitely, if you're interested, you would register through Patient Education, 694-0230. There's also a stress class, Coping with Stress, that is offered through Mental Health. And so you can give their number a call as well, for more just coping tips on stress. And I believe they're just kind of a one class deal. It's not like over a 6-week period or anything like that. The healthy eating resources for more information is included in your package of information, as I mentioned. Other than that, there's a wonderful program that I feel passionate about, and it's called Create and Change, and it talks about changing our relationship with food. And so often, knowledge of nutrition and the way we should be eating is not always the most important problem. Sometimes it's our relationship with food where we struggle. We kind of get stuck in those patterns of comforting ourselves with food and just responding to stress by stress eating and that sort of thing. So this workshop is to help build our awareness of kind of how we relate to food, and it looks at kind of trying to build some practical methods of thinking about food in a more positive mindset. So that's another excellent session that is run periodically in different locations, both Moose Jaw, Central Butte, and Revelberg, and Assiniboia. So if you're interested, do give us a call at Patient Education, and we'd love to help you arrange that once those classes are available. So that's kind of it for today. I just wanted to thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope you picked up a few tips on managing your healthy eating. If you have any questions, just feel free to let us know. We'd love to schedule an appointment with you to see the dietitian, and just wish you all the best. And I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you in the future. So take care. Thank you.